Imagine standing on the edge of a massive, straight-up steep rock face. Every breath you take feels like it might be your last. You are hundreds of feet above the ground, holding onto the rock with just your hands and feet. The sky above you is a wide, endless blue. The air is so thin it feels like you're trying to breathe through a tiny straw. Below, the earth drops away in an amazing fall, giving you a view that's both stunning and scary. The wind is strong, cutting through your clothes and making every movement a challenge. You're gripping the rough rock, feeling every crack and edge under your fingers. Each grip on the rock feels like a fight against gravity and nature. Your heart races as you take a deep breath, trying to stay steady against the wind. Every step you take is a big risk because there's no rope or straps to catch you if you fall. You are feeling the height and difficulty of the climb, which shows that this is not just a physical test. This is a test of your courage and determination. Every step is a test of your skill, bravery, and grip. You know that one wrong move could mean the end. Free solo climbing gives a thrill like nothing else. It's pure freedom, but with that freedom comes extreme danger. It's a sport where the climber ascends a route without ropes or other protective equipment. As you climb higher, the dangers become clearer. One small mistake, or a misstep, could mean falling into the void below. The stakes are incredibly high. Climbing becomes a test against your own body and the cruelness of the natural elements around you. If you make it to the top of a difficult climb, only one mistake can lose your grip and fall on the way down. The beauty of the mountain is breathtaking, but it stands in sharp contrast to its deadly risks. It makes every moment an elegant dance between life and death. In today's episode, we're covering 6 of the most tragic free solo climbing disasters, from a small misstep to a wet route to loose holds. As always, viewer discretion is advised. The first free solo climber I want to talk about is Tony Wilmont, who faced a horrifying disaster in 1972. Tony Wilmont was a climber who lived for the thrill. He loved the challenge of taking on rock faces without any safety gear. He climbed because it made him feel alive. Every grip, every step was a dance with danger. He spent most of his time at the Avon Gorge in England, a place that became his second home. The Avon Gorge is a stunning place, a deep river valley with steep limestone rock faces rising on both sides. For climbers, it's both beautiful and challenging. The rock can be slippery, and the climbs are steep. But Tony was used to this. He knew every crack and every edge. He had climbed there countless times, always pushing himself to go higher and faster. On that day in 1972, Tony set out for another solo climb at the gorge. It was just another day for him, another chance to feel that rush. The sun was shining and the air was cool. Perfect climbing weather. He picked a route he had done many times before. He was confident, maybe a bit too confident. He started his climb with a steady pace, moving smoothly from one hold to the next, without ropes. As Tony climbed higher and the ground disappeared below him, the wind picked up and the rock face became difficult to navigate. And that thrilled him. Tony kept going. He loved this feeling, the freedom of climbing without ropes. Every move felt like a test of his skill and his nerve. Tony reached a difficult part of the climb, a section where a rock stuck out, and the holds were small and hard to grip. He had done this part before, but this time, something was different. Maybe the rock was a little slicker than he expected, or perhaps he just lost his focus for a second. His foot slipped, and suddenly, Tony was hanging on by just his fingertips. Now imagine you're Tony at that moment. Your heart is racing. You know you're in trouble, but you also know you have to act fast. Tony tried to regain his footing, but the rock was too smooth. He couldn't find a good hold. His hands started to sweat, making it even harder to grip the rock. And then, it happened. His grip gave way and Tony fell. He dropped fast, with nothing to slow him down. It must have felt like he was flying for a few seconds. Then gravity took over. He hit the ground with a force that no one could survive. Tony's fall surprised everyone who knew him. He was experienced and careful. He knew that rock face like the back of his hand. So, what went wrong? How could someone so skilled have made such a fatal mistake? Some say it was just bad luck, that Tony slipped on a wet spot on the rock that he didn't see. Others think maybe he was too comfortable with the climb and let his guard down. Whatever the reason, Tony's death hit the climbing community hard. Tony's name is remembered among those who pushed the limits of climbing, but faced the tragic consequences of such a high-stakes activity. It was a reminder that no matter how good and experienced you are, free solo climbing is always dangerous. Every climb is a gamble, and sometimes the mountain wins. So why do people like Tony climb without ropes? Why take such a big risk? It's hard to understand unless you've been up there, feeling the rock under your hands, the wind in your face, and the world falling away beneath your feet. For Tony and many like him, climbing was a way of life to connect with nature, to find peace. And some climbers are in it for the thrill of the climb and the adrenaline. The next story of Dwight Bishop is all about determination, danger, and disaster. Dwight wasn't just any climber. He was a man who loved the thrill of the climb, the feel of the rock beneath his fingers. He climbed because he felt alive up there, high above the world. You can imagine him waking up every morning with a spark in his eye, ready for the next climb and challenge. Dwight had been climbing for years. He knew every move, grip, and distance. He wasn't reckless. He was confident. He believed in his skills and his strength. But like many who push the limits, he faced a fine line between bravery and danger. One of Dwight's favorite places to climb was Tahquitz Rock in California. It's a place known for its beautiful views and tough routes. On July 16, 2004, Dwight set out to free solo the west face of Tahquitz Rock. The day started like any other for Dwight. The sun was shining, the rock was warm, and the wind was light. Dwight felt good. He had climbed this route before. He knew the holds and the moves. He felt ready. He climbed higher and the ground fell away beneath him, but Dwight didn't mind. He felt at home up there, alone with the rock. All of a sudden, somewhere on the climb, Dwight slipped. His hand missed a hold, and his foot slipped on a small extension. It happened so fast. One moment you're climbing, and the next you're falling. Can you picture it? That sudden drop. The wind is rushing past your ears. Your stomach is in your throat. You reach out for something, anything, to grab. But there's nothing there. Just a long, terrifying fall to the ground below. When Dwight fell, he fell over 100 feet. That's like falling from a 10-story building. It's a long way down. After Dwight's fall, there were many questions. What made him slip? Was it a loose rock, a sudden blow of wind, or just a momentary lapse in focus? We might never know. What we do know is that Dwight's death was a huge loss. He was a beloved member of the climbing community, known for his skill and his spirit. His death was a wake-up call. For many climbers, it reminded them of the risks they take every time they climb without a rope and safety gear. For Dwight's family and friends, his death was a painful loss. They lost someone they loved who lived life to the fullest, but also someone who took big risks. So what do you think? Was Dwight's climb worth the risk? Did he push too far? Or was he just following his passion? It's hard to say. Remember that when you're out there climbing or doing anything risky, think about Dwight. Jimmy Jewell was another climber who made his own choices and ultimately pushed his luck too many times. Imagine you are climbing higher and higher, feeling the sun on your back and the rock under your fingers. But suddenly, you lose your grip. Your foot slips, and in an instant, you're falling. Can you imagine that feeling? This was the reality of Jimmy Jewell, who faced dizzying heights and made a choice that led to his final climb. Jimmy was one of those guys who seemed like he was born to climb. From a young age, he loved finding new ways to challenge himself. He was drawn to the rock faces that towered above him, to the feeling of being high up. It was far from the safety of the ground. Climbing wasn't just a sport for Jimmy. It was a way of life. Jimmy didn't start as a solo climber. Like many, he began with ropes and safety gear. But as he grew more skilled, he wished for more freedom and thrill. He wanted to feel the rock under his hands and feet, without anything between him and the mountain. Over time, he moved away from ropes and started climbing solo. He once said that he felt more comfortable free soloing than climbing with ropes. Despite the risks, he believed that careful planning and understanding his limits helped him stay safe. He climbed all over, from the rugged cliffs of Wales to the steep faces of the Alps. Every climb was a challenge, and every summit was a victory. Jimmy was good, really good. He knew how to read the rock and find the best holds. He knew how to keep his balance on the narrowest extension. But there was always a risk, and Jimmy knew that. One of his most famous climbs was the free solo climb of the corner at Llanberis Pass in North Wales. This route, graded at E5, a difficult level in British climbing, was successfully completed without any protection, a remarkable achievement. His calm and focused approach made him stand out from other climbers, and he was known for his steady nerves, even when faced with death-resist climbs. On October 31, 1987, Jimmy set out to climb a route in the Llanberis Pass in Wales. It was a climb he had done before, something he felt comfortable with. The day was clear, the rock was dry. Jimmy felt good and he was ready for the challenge. He stretched his arms with a deep breath and started his ascent. His hands and feet found the familiar hold. He began to move up the rock, one careful step at a time. The ground fell away below him, but Jimmy stayed focused. He knew every inch of this climb. As he climbed higher, Jimmy felt the rush of the wind against his face, the warmth of the sun on his back. He was in his element, doing what he loved most. But just like Tony and Dwight, Jimmy lost his grip. His foot slipped and he fell instantly. Can you imagine that feeling? You were holding onto the rock and the next you were dropping. The wind rushed past you, your heart in your throat. You reached out, trying to grab onto something. But there was nothing there. Jimmy fell over 80 feet. That's like falling from an 8-story building. The impact was serious, and Jimmy didn't survive the fall. When news of Jimmy's fall spread, it hit the climbing community hard. Jimmy was well known and well liked. He was a skilled climber, someone who knew what he was doing. But as you know, this is a dangerous sport. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, the beauty of free solo climbing lies in its simplicity. Climbers rely only on their strength, skill, and focus. They connect deeply with the rock, feeling every crack and edge under their fingertips. There's nothing between them and the vast sky above or the ground far below. The sense of accomplishment when reaching the top is unlike any other. Climbers describe it as a feeling of being alive in the moment, where every breath and movement counts. But with this beauty comes great danger. One wrong move or slip and a climber can fall hundreds of feet. There are no ropes to catch you, no equipment to save you. This is what makes free solo climbing both fascinating and frightening. But possibly one of the most destructive reminders of the mountain's powerful nature came in 1993 for Derek Hersey, who climbed some of the most dangerous routes. Standing on the edge of a towering cliff may sound like an adventure, until you hear this story from 1993. Derek Hersey was a legend in the climbing world. You might not have heard of him, but in the climbing community, Derek was known for his bold spirit and his incredible solo climbs. Derek was born in England, but he found his true home in the mountains. He moved to the United States, where he found the perfect playground for his passion, the rugged, rocked faces of Yosemite. Derek gained recognition for his incredible solo climbs on famous routes like the Naked Edge in Colorado's El Dorado Canyon and Astroman in Yosemite, which are considered very difficult even for climbers using ropes. In Yosemite, Derek made a name for himself. He tackled some of the toughest climbs in the park. He climbed the steep, smooth faces of the Half Dome and the towering El Capitan. These climbs weren't just tough, they were deadly. And that's what Derek loved, the challenge and the thrill of living on the edge. Feeling the rock under your fingers and every muscle working to keep you in place. The wind is whipping around you and the ground is far below. That's what Derek loved. And for years, he lived for that rush. He lived for the climb. Derek knew that every climb could be his last, but he did it anyway. On May 28, 1993, Derek decided to climb a route he had done before on the Stack Salate on Sentinel Rock in Yosemite. It was a tough climb, but Derek had done it many times. He felt confident. He was familiar with the rock holds and the challenges. He set out early in the morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, and the air was crisp and clear. Derek stood at the base of Sentinel Rock looking up at the climb ahead. His hands found the familiar holds, and his feet searched for the tiny extensions. He moved quickly and confidently. The rock felt like an old friend beneath his fingers. But as Derek climbed higher, the weather began to change. Clouds gathered, and the wind picked up. It was getting cold, and the rock was starting to feel slippery. Derek was high up now, far above the ground. He knew he needed to be careful, but he had climbed in worse conditions before. He kept going, his focus razor sharp. But because of the weather change, the rock was wetter than he thought, and the wind threw him off balance. It was a perfect storm of the ultimate worst circumstances as a free solo climber. Suddenly, he was falling over 800 feet. News of Derek's death spread quickly through the climbing community. Everyone knew Derek, and everyone respected him. He was fearless, skilled, and passionate. He lived his life on his own terms, doing what he loved. The next story is about Jon Bachar, who faced impossible climbs, battled gravity, and ultimately took a jump over that he couldn't come back from. Jon grew up in California. From a young age, just like every other free soloist, he had this pull toward the mountains. Climbing wasn't just a hobby for Jon. It was his life. He felt alive when he was up on a rock face, with the wind in his hair and the sun on his back. Jon pioneered many free solo climbs, including some of the hardest routes in the world. His solo climb of New Dimensions in Yosemite and Midnight Lightning at Camp 4 were legendary achievements. Bachar's philosophy was that climbing should be done with the least amount of aid possible, relying purely on the climber's own abilities. He tackled some of the hardest climbs, the ones other climbers thought was impossible without ropes, but Jon didn't see it that way. To him, free soloing was the purest form of climbing. It was about trust in his skills, instincts, and the rock beneath his fingers. Jon's influence extended beyond his climbs. He was a part of the Stone Masters, a group of climbers in the 1970s and 1980s who helped shape modern rock climbing. His dedication to fitness and clean climbing without leaving any traces or using fixed gear, inspired a generation of climbers. He even designed the famous Bachar ladder, a training tool for climbers to improve their strength and tolerance. In 1981, Bachar famously offered a $10,000 challenge to anyone who could keep up with him on a day of climbing, a testimony to his confidence and skill. No one ever won that challenge. Hundreds of feet up with nothing but your hands and feet keeping you from a deadly fall, the world below looks like a distant dream. That's where Jon felt most alive, on the edge of something incredible. But let's talk about the risks. Free solo climbing is no joke. It's incredibly dangerous. Every time Jon stepped onto a rock face, he knew the risks. He knew one mistake, and it could all be over. Jon wasn't reckless, though. He was confident but also careful. He trained harder than anyone, spending hours on end climbing, practicing, and perfecting his technique. He believed that his preparation and focus would keep him safe. But when you're free soloing, the line between confidence and overconfidence is razor thin, and Jon loved to walk that line. He loved to push himself to see how far he could go. On July 5, 2009, Jon was at Dyke Wall in the Eastern Sierra, which is a place he had climbed many times before. The route wasn't the hardest he had ever faced. He knew the rock and the moves. He felt ready. Jon started to climb. His hands and feet moved with the precision of a dancer. Every move was calculated, every step deliberate. But as he climbed higher, something changed. Maybe he got too comfortable, or he misjudged the hold. Whatever it was, Jon slipped. His hand missed the grip, and suddenly he was falling. Jon Bachar, the legend, plummeted over 100 feet directly into the unforgiving ground. News of Jon's death spread quickly. The climbing world was in disbelief. Jon wasn't just a climber. He was a hero who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But his death was a harsh reminder of the risks that come with free soloing. No matter how skilled and careful you are, sometimes the mountain has other plans. People talked about Jon's death for weeks. They wondered what happened. Was it a mistake? Was it bad luck? Was it just his time? But more than anything, people remembered Jon for his passion, spirit, and his love for the climb. Our last story is about Austin Howell, a fearless solo climber from Illinois who lived for the thrill of the climb, until one fateful day changed everything. Austin grew up with a deep connection to nature. He loved being outdoors, whether it was hiking or climbing. But climbing? That was different. It was his true passion. He felt a sense of freedom on a rock, a kind of peace that he couldn't find anywhere else. Austin made a name for himself with impressive free solo climbs, including routes on famous rock faces like Short-Off Mountain in North Carolina. His favorite climbing areas included the crags of the Appalachian region. He would often share his experiences and insights through social media and his blog, where he discussed the mental challenges of free soloing and the importance of understanding one's limits. In the climbing community, Austin was known for his fearless attitude. He wasn't the strongest climber, but he had heart and passion. He wasn't afraid to push himself, to tackle tough climbs without any safety gear. For Austin, it wasn't about being reckless. It was about feeling alive, about testing his limits and finding out what he was truly capable of. But let's not sugarcoat it. Free soloing is dangerous. It's probably one of the riskiest sports out there. Every time Austin climbed without a rope, he was putting his life on the line. He knew that and understood the risks, but that didn't stop him. It only pushed him to train harder to get better at climbing higher. Austin had a routine. He would spend hours each day training to improve his grip, strengthening his body. He believed in preparation. He believed that if he trained hard enough, he could minimize the risks. But that doesn't mean eliminating them. On June 30th, 2019, Austin set out for what would be his final climb. He was at Short-Off Mountain in North Carolina, a place he had climbed many times before. The route wasn't the hardest, but it was still a challenge. Austin was confident. He knew this climb well. He felt prepared. He begins his climb. His hands find the holds easily. His feet move with precision. He feels strong and focused. But as he climbs higher, something happens. He reached for a hold that wasn't there. Whatever it was, Austin lost his grip. Suddenly, he was falling. 32-year-old Austin fell over 200 feet, the equivalent of a 20-story building. The impact was devastating. He didn't survive the fall. It was a shocking loss for everyone who knew him, who followed his adventures. Austin Howell, the fearless solo climber who had taken his final climb. News of Austin's death spread quickly through the climbing community. People were sad and devastated. Austin wasn't just a climber. He was an inspiration. He was someone who showed others what it meant to live life fully. His death was a painful reminder of the risks that come with free soloing. Even the most experienced climbers can make mistakes. Even the best can fall. People talked about Austin's death for days. They wondered what had gone wrong. Was it a misstep? A moment of overconfidence? Or was it just bidding luck? But more than anything, people remembered Austin for his passion, spirit, and joy for climbing. Austin's death left a hole in the climbing community. It made people think about their own choices, about why they climb, and about how to stay safe. For some, it was a reminder to be more careful, to take fewer risks. For others, it was a reminder of why they loved climbing in the first place, to feel alive and connect with nature. The stories we've talked about show how close free solo climbing is to both success and disaster, bravery and danger. Every time free solo climbers take a step, they face the mountain's risks. So, knowing how dangerous it is, why do you think people keep going back to free solo climbing? Is free solo climbing passion worth the risk? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.